Third, food and cooking. Now, here's something about the Western art of cooking. There is greater purity observed in our cooking than in any other country. On the other hand, we have not that perfect regularity, method, and cleanliness of the English table. Every day, our cook first bathes and changes his clothes before entering the kitchen. He neatly cleanses all the utensils and the hearth with water and earth, and if he chances to touch his face, nose, or any part of his body, he washes his hands before he touches again any food. The Western cook scarcely bathes. Moreover, he tastes with a spoon the cooking he is engaged in and does not think much of redipping the spoon into the pot. Taking out his handkerchief, he blows his nose vigorously, and again with the same hand. He perchance kneads the dough. He never thinks of washing his hands when he comes from outside and begins his cooking at once. But all the same, he has snow white clothes and cap. Maybe he is dancing on the dough. Why? Because he may knead it thoroughly well with the whole pressure of his body, no matter if the sweat of his brow gets mixed with it. Fortunately, nowadays, machines are widely used for the task. After all this sacrilege, when the bread is finished, it is placed on a porcelain dish covered with a snow white napkin and is carried by the servant dressed in a spotless suit of clothes with white gloves on. Then it is laid upon the table spread over with a clean tablecloth. Mark here, the gloves, lest the man touches anything with his bare fingers. Observe ours on the other hand. Our Brahmin cook has first purified himself with a bath and then cooked the dinner in thoroughly cleaned utensils. But he serves it to you on a plate on the bare floor, which has been pasted over with earth and cow dung, and his cloth, albeit daily washed, is so dirty that it looks as if it were never washed. And if the plantain leaf, which sometimes serves the purpose of a plate, is torn, there is a good chance of the soup getting mixed up with the moist flour and cow dung paste and giving rise to a wonderful taste. After taking a nice bath, we put on a dirty looking cloth, almost sticky with oil, and in the West, they put on a perfectly clean suit on a dirty body without having had a proper bath. Now, this is to be understood thoroughly, for here is the point of essential difference between the Orient and the Occident. That inward vision of the Hindu and the outward vision of the West are manifest in all their respective manners and customs. The Hindu always looks inside, and the Westerner outside. The Hindu keeps diamonds wrapped in a rag, as it were. The Westerner preserves a lump of earth in a golden casket. The Hindu bathes to keep his body clean. He does not care how dirty his cloth may be. The Westerner takes care to wear clean clothes. What matters it if dirt remains on his body? The Hindu keeps neat and clean the rooms, doors, floors, and everything inside his house. What matters it if a heap of dirt and refuse lies outside his entrance door? The Westerner looks to covering his floors with bright and beautiful carpets. The dirt and dust under them is all right if concealed from view. The Hindu lets his drains run open over the road. The bad smell does not count much. The drains in the West are underground, the hotbed of typhoid fever. The Hindu cleanses the inside, the Westerner cleanses the outside. What is wanted is a clean body with clean clothes. Rinsing the mouth, cleansing the teeth, and all that must be done, but in private. The dwelling houses must be kept clean, as well as the streets and thoroughfares and all outlying places. The cook must keep his clothes clean as well as his body. Moreover, the meals must be partaken of in spotless cups and plates, sitting in a neat and tidy place. Achara, or observance of the established rules of conduct in life, is the first step to religion, and of that again, cleanliness of body and mind, cleanliness in everything, is the most important factor. Will one devoid of achara ever attain to religion? Don't you see before your very eyes the miseries of those who are devoid of achara? Should we not, thus paying dearly for it, learn the lesson? Cholera, malaria, and plague have made their permanent home in India and are carrying away their victims by millions. Whose fault is it? Ours, to be sure. We are sadly devoid of achara. All our different sects of Hinduism admit the truth of the celebrated saying of the Shruti, Ahara Shuddhau Sattva Shuddhihi, Sattva Shuddhau Dhruva Smritihi. When the food is pure, then the inner sense gets purified. On the purification of the inner sense, memory of the soul's perfection becomes steady. Only, according to Shankaracharya, the word ahara means the sense perceptions, and Ramanuja takes the word to mean food. But what is the solution? All sects agree that both are necessary and both ought to be taken into account. Without pure food, how can the indriyas, organs, perform their respective functions properly? Everyone knows by experience that impure food weakens the power of receptivity of the indriyas or makes them act in opposition to the will. It is a well known fact that indigestion distorts the vision of things and makes one thing appeal as another, and that want of food makes the eyesight and other powers of the senses dim and weak. Similarly, it is often seen that some particular kind of food brings on some particular state of the body and the mind. This principle is at the root of those many rules which are so strictly enjoined in Hindu society, that we should take this sort and avoid that sort of food, though in many cases, forgetting their essential substance, the kernel, we are now busy only with quarreling about the shell and keeping watch and ward over it. Ramanujacharya asks us to avoid three sorts at defects, which according to him make food impure. The first defect is that of the jati, that is, the very nature or the species to which the food belongs, as onion, garlic, and so on. These have an exciting tendency and, when taken, produce restlessness of the mind, or in other words, perturb the intellect. The next is that of ashraya, that is, the nature of the person from whom the food comes. The food coming from a wicked person will make one impure and think wicked thoughts, while the food coming from a good man will elevate one's thoughts. Then the other is nimitta dosha, that is, impurity in food due to such agents in it as dirt and dust, worms or hair. Taking such food also makes the mind impure. Of these three defects, anyone can eschew the jati and the nimitta, but it is not easy for all to avoid the ashraya. It is only to avoid this ashraya dosha that we have so much of don't touchism amongst us nowadays. Don't touch me, don't touch me. But in most cases, the cart is put before the horse, and the real meaning of the principle being misunderstood, it becomes in time a queer and hideous superstition. In these cases, the acharas of the great acharyas, the teachers of mankind, should be followed instead of the lokacharas, that is, the customs followed by the people in general. One ought to read the lives of such great masters as Sri Chaitanya Deva and other similarly great religious teachers and see how they behaved themselves with their fellow men in this respect. As regards the jati dosha in food, no other country in the world furnishes a better field for its observation than India. The Indians of all nations take the purest of foods, and all over the world there is no other country where the purity as regards the jati is so well observed as in India. We had better attend to the nimitta dosha a little more now in India, as it is becoming a source of serious evil with us. It has become too common with us to buy food from the sweet vendor's shop in the bazaar, and you can judge for yourselves how impure these confections are from the point of view of the nimitta dosha. For being kept exposed, the dirt and dust of the roads, as well as dead insects, adhere to them, and how stale and polluted they must sometimes be. All this dyspepsia that you notice in every home and the prevalence of diabetes from which the townspeople suffer so much nowadays are due to the taking of impure food from the bazaars, and that the village people are not as a rule so subject to these complaints is principally due to the fact that they have not these bazaars near them, where they can buy at their will such poisonous food as luchi, kachuri, etc. I shall dwell on this in detail later on. This is in short the old general rule about food, but there were, and still are, many differences of opinion about it. Again, as in the old, so in the present day, there is a great controversy whether it is good or bad to take animal food or live only on a vegetable diet, whether we are benefited or otherwise by taking meat. Besides, the question whether it is right or wrong to kill animals has always been a matter of great dispute. One party says that to take away life is a sin, and on no account should it be done. The other party replies, "A fig for your opinion. It is simply impossible to live without killing." The Shastras also differ, and rather confuse one on this point. In one place the Shastra dictates, "Kill animals in yajnas," and again in another place it says, "Never take away life." The Hindus hold that it is a sin to kill animals except in sacrifices, but one can with impunity enjoy the pleasure of eating meat after the animal is sacrificed in a yajna. Indeed, There are certain rules prescribed for the householder in which he is required to kill animals on occasions, such as Shraddha and so on. And if he omits to kill animals at those times, he is condemned as a sinner. Manu says that if those that are invited to Shraddha and certain other ceremonies do not partake of the animal food offered there, they take birth in an animal body in their next. On the other hand, the Jains, the Buddhists, and the Vaishnavas protest, saying, "We do not believe in the dictates of such Hindu Shastras. On no account should the taking away of life be tolerated." Ashoka, the Buddhist emperor, we read, punished those who would perform yajnas or offer meat to the invited at any ceremony. The position in which the modern Vaishnavas find themselves is rather one of difficulty. Instances are found in the Ramayana and the Mahabharata of the drinking of wine and the taking of meat by Rama and Krishna, whom they worship as God. Sita Devi vows meat, rice, and 1,000 jars of wine to the river goddess Ganga. In the West, the contention is whether animal food is injurious to health or not, whether it is more strengthening than vegetable diet or not, and so on. One party says that those that take animal food suffer from all sorts of bodily complaints. The other contradicts this and says, that is all fiction. If that were true, then the Hindus would have been the healthiest race, and the powerful nations such as the English, the Americans, and others whose principal food is meat would have succumbed to all sorts of maladies and ceased to exist by this time. One says that the flesh of the goat makes the intellect like that of the goat, the flesh of the swine like that of the swine, and fish like that of the fish. The other declares that it can as well be argued then that the potato makes a potato-like brain, that vegetables make a vegetable-like brain, resembling dull and dead matter. Is it not better to have the intelligence of a living animal than to have the brain dull and inert like dead matter? One party says that those things which are in the chemical composition of animal food are also equally present in the vegetables. The other ridicules it and exclaims, "Why, they are in the air too. Go then and live on air only." One argues that the vegetarians are very painstaking and can go through hard and long sustained labor. The other says, if that were true, then the vegetarian nations would occupy the foremost rank, which is not the case, the strongest and the foremost nations being always those that take animal food. Those who advocate animal food contend, look at the Hindus and the Chinamen, how poor they are. They do not take meat, but live somehow on the scanty diet of rice and all sorts of vegetables. Look at their miserable condition. And the Japanese were also in the same plight, but since they commenced taking meat, they turned over a new leaf. In the Indian regiments, there are about 1.5 lakh of native sepoys. See how many of them are vegetarians. The best parts of them, such as the Sikhs and the Gurkhas, are never vegetarians. One party says indigestion is due to animal food. The other says that is all stuff and nonsense. It is mostly the vegetarians who suffer from stomach complaints. Again, it may be the vegetable food acts as an effective purgative to the system, but is that any reason that you should induce the whole world to take it? Whatever one or the other may say, the real fact, however, is that the nations who take the animal food are always, as a rule, notably brave, heroic, and thoughtful. The nations who take animal food also assert that in those days when the smoke from yajnas used to rise in the Indian sky, and the Hindus used to take the meat of animals sacrificed, then only great religious geniuses and intellectual giants were born among them. But since the drifting of the Hindus into the Babaji's vegetarianism, not one great man arose midst them. Taking this view into account, the meat eaters in our country are afraid to give up their habitual diet. The Arya Samajists are divided amongst themselves on this point, and a controversy is raging within their fold. One party holding that animal food is absolutely necessary, and the opposite party denouncing it as extremely wrong and unjust. In this way, discussions of a conflicting character, giving rise to mutual abuses, quarrels, and fights, are going on. After carefully scrutinizing all sides of the question and setting aside all fanaticism that is rampant on this delicate question of food, I must say that my conviction tends to confirm this view, that the Hindus are, after all, right. I mean that injunction of the Hindu Shastras which lays down the rule that food, like many other things, must be different according to the difference of birth and profession. This is the sound conclusion. But the Hindus of the present day will neither follow their Shastras nor listen to what their great Acharyas taught. To eat meat is surely barbarous, and vegetable food is certainly purer. Who can deny that? For him, surely is a strict vegetarian diet whose one end is to lead solely a spiritual life. But he who has to steer the boat of his life with strenuous labor through the constant life and death struggles and the competition of this world must of necessity take meat. So long as there will be in human society such a thing as the triumph of the strong over the weak, animal food is required. Otherwise, the weak will naturally be crushed under the feet of the strong. It will not do to quote solitary instances of the good effect of vegetable food on some particular person or persons, compare one nation with another, and then draw conclusions. The vegetarians, again, are also divided amongst themselves. Some say that rice, potatoes, wheat, barley, maize, and other starchy foods are of no use. These have been produced by man and are the source of all maladies. Starchy food which generates sugar in the system is most injurious to health. Even horses and cows become sickly and diseased if kept within doors and fed on wheat and rice. But they get well again if allowed to graze freely on the tender and growing herbage in the meadows. There is very little starchy substance in grass and nuts and other green edible herbs. The orangutan eats grass and nuts and does not usually eat potato and wheat. But if he ever does so, he eats them before they are ripe, that is, when there is not much starch in them. Others say that taking roast meat and plenty of fruit and milk is best suited to the attainment longevity. More especially, they who take much fruit regularly do not so soon lose their youth, as the acid of fruit dissolves the foul crust formed on the bones, which is mainly the cause of bringing on old age. All these contentions have no end. They are going on unceasingly. Now the judicious view admitted by all in regard to this vexed question is to take such food as is substantial and nutritious and at the same time easily digested. The food should be such as contains the greatest nutriment in the smallest compass, and be at the same time quickly assimilable. Otherwise, it has necessarily to be taken in large quantity, and consequently the whole day is required only to digest it. If all the energy is spent only in digesting food, what will there be left to do other works? All fried things are really poisonous. The sweets vendor's shop is death's door. In hot countries, the less oil and clarified butter, ghee, taken the better. Butter is more easily digested than ghee. There is very little substance in snow white flour. Whole wheat flour is good as food. For Bengal, the style and preparation of food that are still in vogue in our distant villages are commendable. What ancient Bengali poet do you find singing the praise of luchi and kachuri? These luchis and kachuris have been introduced into Bengal from the northwestern provinces, but even there, people take them only occasionally. I have never seen even there anyone who lives mainly on things fried in ghee, day after day. The Chobe wrestlers of Mathura are no doubt fond of luchis and sweetmeats, but in a few years, Chobeji's power of digestion is ruined, and he has to drug himself with appetizing preparations called churans. The poor die of starvation because they can get nothing to eat, and the rich die of starvation because what they take is not food. Any and every stuff eaten is not food. That is real food, which when eaten is well assimilated. It is better to fast rather than stuff oneself with anything and everything. In the delicacies of the sweetmeat shops, there is hardly anything nourishing. On the other hand, there is poison. Of old, people used to take those injurious things only occasionally, but now, the townspeople, especially those who come from villages to live in towns, are the greatest sinners in this respect, as they take them every day. What wonder is there that they die prematurely of dyspepsia? If you are hungry, throw away all sweets and things fried in ghee into the ditch, and buy a pice worth of muri, popped rice. That will be cheaper and more nutritious food. It is sufficient food to have rice, dal, lentils, whole wheat chapatis, unfermented bread, fish, vegetables, and milk. But dal has to be taken as the southern Indians take it, that is, the soup of it only. The rest of the preparation give it to the cattle. He may take meat who can afford it, but not making it too rich with heating spices, as the northwestern people do. The spices are no food at all. To take them in abundance is only due to a bad habit. Dal is a very substantial food but hard to digest. Pea soup prepared of tender peas is easily digested and pleasant to the taste. In Paris, this pea soup is a favorite dish. First, boil the peas well, then make a paste of them and mix them with water. Now strain the soup through a wire strainer, like that in which milk is strained, and all the outer skin will be separated. Then add some spices such as turmeric, black pepper, etc. according to taste, and broil it with a little ghee in the pan, and you get a pleasant and wholesome dal. The meat eaters can make it delicious by cooking it with the head of a goat or fish. That we have so many cases of diabetes in India is chiefly due to indigestion. Of course, there are solitary instances in which excessive brain work is the cause, but with the majority, it is indigestion. Pot belly is the foremost sign of indigestion. Does eating mean stuffing oneself? That much which one can assimilate is proper food for one. Growing thin or fat is equally due to indigestion. Do not give yourself up as lost because some symptoms of diabetes are noticeable in you. Those are nothing in our country and should not be taken seriously into account. Only pay more attention to your diet so that you may avoid indigestion. Be in the open air as much as possible and take good long walks and work hard. The muscles of the leg should be as hard as iron. If you are in service, take leave when possible and make a pilgrimage to the Badrikashrama in the Himalayas. If the journey is accomplished on foot through the ascent and descent of 200 miles in the hills, you will see that this ghost of diabetes will depart from you. Do not let the doctors come near you. Most of them will harm you more than do any good. And so far as possible, never take medicines, which in most cases kill the patient sooner than the illness itself. If you can, walk all the way from town to your native village every year during the puja vacation. To be rich in our country has come to be synonymous with being the embodiment of laziness and dependence. One who has to walk being supported by another, or one who has to be fed by another, is doomed to be miserable, is a veritable invalid. He who eats cautiously only the finer coating of the luchi, for fear that the whole will not agree with him, is already dead in life. Is he a man or a worm who cannot walk 20 miles at a stretch? Who can save one who invites illness and premature death of his own will? And as for fermented bread, it is also poison. Do not touch it at all. Flour mixed with yeast becomes injurious. Never take any fermented thing. In this respect, the prohibition in our Shastras of partaking of any such article of food is a fact of great importance. Any sweet thing which has turned sour is called in the Shastras Shukta, and that is prohibited to be taken, excepting curd, which is good and beneficial. If you have to take bread, toast it well over the fire. Impure water and impure food are the cause of all maladies. In America nowadays, it has become a craze to purify the drinking water. The filter has had its day and is now discredited because it only strains the water through, while all the finer germs of diseases such as cholera, plague, remain intact in it. Moreover, the filter itself gradually becomes the hotbed of these germs. When the filter was first introduced in Calcutta for 5 years, it is said there was no outbreak of cholera. Since then, it has become as bad as ever, for the reason that the huge filter itself has now come to be the vehicle of cholera germs. Of all kinds, the simple method that we have of placing 3 earthen jars one over another on a 3-footed bamboo frame is the best. But every second or third day, the sand and charcoal should be changed or used again after heating them. The method of straining water through a cloth containing a lump of alum in it, what we find in vogue in the villages along the banks of the Ganga in the vicinity of Calcutta, is the best of all. The particles of alum, taking with them all earth and impurities and the disease germs, gradually settle at the bottom of the deep jar as sediment. This simple system brings into disrepute pipe water and excels all your foreign filters. Moreover, if the water is boiled, it becomes perfectly safe. Boil the water when the impurities are settled down by the alum, and then drink it, and throw away filters and such other things into the ditch. Now in America, the drinking water is first turned into vapor by means of huge machines. Then the vapor is cooled down into water again, and through another machine, pure air is pressed into it to substitute that air which goes out during the process of vaporization. This water is very pure and is used in every home. In our country, he who has some means feeds his children with all sorts of sweets and ghee-fried things because perchance it is a shame, just think what the people will say, to let them have only rice and chapatis. What can you expect children fed like that to be put disproportionate in figure, lazy, worthless idiots, with no backbone of their own? The English people, who are so strong a race, who work so hard day and night, and whose native place is a cold country, Even they hold in dread the very name of sweetmeats and food fried in butter. And we, who live in the zone of fire, as it were, who do not like to move from one place to another, what do we eat? Luchis, kachuris, sweets, and other things, all fried in ghee or oil. Formerly, our village zamindars in Bengal would think nothing of walking 20 or 30 miles and would eat twice 20 koi fish, bones and all, and they lived to 100 years. Now their sons and grandsons come to Calcutta and put on airs, wear spectacles, eat the sweets from the bazaars, hire a carriage to go from one street to another, and then complain of diabetes. And their life is cut short. This is the result of their being civilized, Calcuttized people. And doctors and Vaidyas hasten their ruin too. They are all knowing. They think they can cure anything with medicine. If there is a little flatulence, immediately some medicine is prescribed. Alas, it never enters into the heads of these Vaidyas to advise them to keep away from medicine and go and have a good walk of 4 or 5 miles or so. I am seeing many countries and many ways and preparations of food, but none of them approaches the admirable cooking of our various dishes of Bengal, and it is not too much to say that one should like to take rebirth for the sake of again enjoying their excellence. It is a great pity that one does not appreciate the value of teeth when one has them. Why should we imitate the West as regards food, and how many can afford to do so? The food which is suitable in our part of the country is pure Bengali food, cheap, wholesome, and nourishing, like that of the people of eastern Bengal. Imitate their food as much as you can. The more you lean westwards to copy the modes of food, the worse you are, and the more uncivilized you become. You are Calcuttites, civilized, forsooth. Carried away by the charm of that destructive net which is of your own creation, the bazaar sweets, Bankura has consigned its popped rice to the river Damodar. Its kalai dal has been cast into the ditch, and Dhaka and Vikrampur have thrown to the dogs their old dishes. Or in other words, they have become civilized. You have gone to rack and ruin, and are leading others in the same path. Told townspeople, and you pride yourselves on your being civilized. And these provincial people are so foolish that they will eat all the refuse of Calcutta and suffer from dyspepsia and dysentery, but will not admit that it is not suiting them, and will defend themselves by saying that the air of Calcutta is damp and saline. They must by all means be townspeople in every respect. So far, in brief, about the merits of food and other customs. Now I shall say something in the matter of what the Westerners generally eat, and how by degrees it has changed. The food of the poor in all countries is some species of corn. Herbs, vegetables, and fish and meat fall within the category of luxuries and are used in the shape of chutney. The crop which grows in abundance and is the chief produce of a country is the staple food of its poorer classes, as in Bengal, Orissa, Madras, and the Malabar coasts. The prime food is rice, pulse, and vegetables, and sometimes fish and meat are used for chutney only. The food of the well-to-do class in other parts of India is chapatis, unfermented bread, of wheat and rice. Of the people in general, mainly chapatis of bajra, marhua, janar, jingora, and other corns. All over India, herbs, vegetables, pulse, fish, and meat are used only to make tasteful the roti, unfermented bread, or the rice, as the case may be, and hence they are called in Sanskrit vyanjana, that is, that which seasons food. In the Punjab, Rajputana, and the Deccan, though the rich people and the princes take many kinds of meat every day, yet with them even, the principal food is roti or rice. He who takes daily 1 pound of meat surely takes 2 pounds of chapatis along with it. Similarly, in the West, the chief foods of the people in poor countries, and especially of the poor class in the rich parts, are bread and potatoes. Meat is rarely taken, and if taken, is considered as a chutney. In Spain, Portugal, Italy, and in other comparatively warm countries, grapes grow profusely, and the wine made of grapes is very cheap. These wines are not intoxicating, that is, unless one drinks a great quantity, one will not get intoxicated, and are very nutritious. The poor of those countries, therefore, use grape juice as a nourishment instead of fish and meat. But in the northern parts of Europe, such as Russia, Sweden, and Norway, bread made of rye, potatoes, and a little dried fish form the food of the poor classes. The food of the wealthy classes of Europe and of all the classes of America is quite different. That is to say, their chief food is fish and meat, and bread, rice, and other things are taken as chutney. In America, bread is taken very little. When fish is served, it is served by itself, or when meat is served, it is served by itself and is often taken without bread or rice. Therefore, the plate has to be changed frequently. If there are 10 sorts of food, the plate has to be changed as many times. If we were to take our food in this way, we should have to serve like this. Suppose the shukta, bitter curry, is first brought, and changing that plate, dal is served on another. In the same way, the soup arrives, and again a little rice by itself, or a few luchis, and so on. One benefit of this way of serving is that a little only of many varieties is taken, and it saves one from eating too much of anything. The French take coffee and one or two slices of bread and butter in the morning, fish and meat, etc., in a moderate way about midday, and the principal meal comes at night. With the Italians and Spaniards, the custom is the same as that of the French. The Germans eat a good deal, 5 or 6 times a day, with more or less meat every time. The English, 3 times, the breakfast being rather small, but tea or coffee between. And the Americans also 3 times, but the meal is rather large every time, with plenty of meat. In all these countries, the principal meal is, however, dinner. The rich have French cooks and have food cooked after the French fashion. To begin with, a little salted fish or roe, or some sort of chutney or vegetable. This is by way of stimulating the appetite. Soup follows. Then, according to the present day fashion, fruit. Next comes fish. Then a meat curry. After which a joint of roast meat, and with it some vegetables. Afterwards, game birds or venison, etc. Then sweets, and finally, delicious ice cream. At the table of the rich, the wine is changed every time the dish changes, and hock, claret, and iced champagne are served with the different courses. The spoon and knife and fork are also changed each time with the plate. After dinner, coffee without milk and liquors in very tiny glasses are brought in, and smoking comes last. The greater the variety of wines served with the various dishes, the greater will the host be regarded as a rich and wealthy man of fashion. As much money is spent over there in giving a dinner as would ruin a moderately rich man of our country. Sitting cross-legged on a wooden seat on the ground, with a similar one to lean his back against, the Arya used to take his food on a single metal plate, placed on a slightly raised wooden stool. The same custom is still in vogue in the Punjab, Rajputana, Maharashtra, and Gujarat. The people of Bengal, Orissa, Telinga, and Malabar, etc., do not use wooden stools to put the plates on, but take their food on a plate or a plantain leaf placed on the ground. Even the Maharaja of Mysore does the same. The Musalmans sit on a large white sheet when taking their food. The Burmese and the Japanese place their plates on the ground and sit supporting themselves on their knees and feet only, and not flat on their haunches like the Indians. The Chinamen sit on chairs, with their dishes placed on the table, and use spoons and wooden chopsticks in taking their food. In the olden times, the Romans and Greeks had a table before them, and reclining on a couch, used to eat their food with their fingers. The Europeans also, sitting on chairs, used to take their food with their fingers from the table. Now they have spoons and forks. The Chinese mode of eating is really an exercise requiring skill. As our pan beetle vendors make, by dexterity of hand, 2 separate pieces of thin iron sheets work like scissors in the trimming of pan leaves, so the Chinese manipulate 2 sticks between 2 fingers and the palm of the right hand, in such a way as to make them act like tongs to carry the vegetables up to their mouths. Again, putting the two together and holding a bowl of rice near the mouth, they push the rice in with the help of those sticks formed like a little shovel. The primitive ancestors of every nation used to eat, it is said, whatever they could get. When they killed a big animal, they would make it last for a month and would not reject it even after it got rotten. Then gradually they became civilized and learned cultivation. Formerly, they could not get their food every day by hunting and would, like the wild animals, gorge themselves one day and then starve 4 or 5 days in the week. Later they escaped that, for they could get their food every day by cultivation, but it remained a standing custom to take with food something like rotten meat or other things of the old days. Primarily, rotten meat was an indispensable article of food. Now that or something else in its place became, like the sauce, a favorite relish. The Eskimos live in the snowy regions where no kind of corn can be produced. Their daily food is fish and flesh. Once in a way, when they lose their appetite, they take just a piece of rotten flesh to recover their lost appetite. Even now, Europeans do not immediately cook wild birds, game, and venison while fresh, but they keep them hanging till they begin to smell a little. In Calcutta, the rotten meat of a deer is sold out as soon as brought to the market, and people prefer some fish when slightly rotten. In some parts of Europe, the cheese which smells a little is regarded as very tasty. Even the vegetarians like to have a little onion and garlic. The southern Indian Brahmin must have them in his cooking. But the Hindu Shastras prohibited that too, making it a sin to take onions, garlic, domestic fowl, and pork to one caste, the Brahmin. They that would take them would lose their caste. So the Orthodox Hindus gave up onions and garlic and substituted in their place asafoetida, a thing which is more strikingly offensive in smell than either of the other two. The Orthodox Brahmins of the Himalayas similarly took to a kind of dried grass smelling just like garlic. And what harm in that? The scriptures do not say anything against taking these things. Every religion contains some rules regarding the taking of certain foods and the avoiding of others. Only Christianity is an exception. The Jains and the Bauddhas will by no means take fish or meat. The Jains again will not even eat potatoes, radishes, or other vegetable roots which grow underground, lest in digging them up worms are killed. They will not eat at night, lest some insect get into their mouths in the dark. The Jews do not eat fish that have no scales, do not eat pork, nor the animals that are not cloven-hoofed, and do not ruminate. Again, if milk or any preparation of milk be brought into the kitchen where fish or flesh is being cooked, the Jews will throw away everything cooked there. For this reason, the Orthodox Jews do not eat the food cooked by other nations. Like the Hindus too, they do not take flesh which is simply slaughtered and not offered to God. In Bengal and the Punjab, another name of flesh that is offered to the goddess is Mahaprasada, lit the great offering. The Jews do not eat flesh unless it is Mahaprasada, that is, unless it is properly offered to God. Hence, they, like the Hindus, are not permitted to buy flesh at any and every shop. The Musalmans obey many rules similar to the Jews, but do not, like them, go to extremes. They do not take milk and fish or flesh at the same meal, but do not consider it so much harmful if they are in the same kitchen or if one touches another. There is much similarity respecting food between the Hindus and the Jews. The Jews, however, do not take wild boar, which the Hindus do. In the Punjab, on account of the deadly animosity between the Hindus and the Musalmans, the former do what the latter will not, and the wild boar has come to be one of the very essential articles of food with the Hindus there. With the Rajputs, hunting the wild boar and partaking of its flesh is rather an act of dharma. The taking of the flesh of even the domesticated pig prevails to a great extent in the Deccan among all castes except the Brahmins. The Hindus eat the wild fowl, cock or hen, but not domesticated fowls. The people of India from Bengal to Nepal and in the Himalayas as far as the borders of Kashmir follow the same usages regarding food. In these parts, the customs of Manu are in force to a large extent even up to this day, but they obtain more specially in the parts from Kumaon to Kashmir than in Bengal, Bihar, Allahabad or Nepal. For example, the Bengalis do not eat fowl or fowl's eggs, but they eat duck's eggs. So do the Nepalese. But from Kumaon upwards, even that is not allowed. The Kashmiris eat with pleasure eggs of the wild duck, but not of the domesticated bird. Of the people of India, beginning from Allahabad, excepting in the Himalayas, they who take the flesh of goat take fowl as well. All these rules and prohibitions with respect to food are for the most part meant, no doubt, in the interests of good health. Of course, in each and every instance, it is difficult accurately to determine which particular food is conducive to health and which is not. Again, swine and fowls eat anything and everything and are very unclean, so they are forbidden. No one sees what the wild animals eat in the forest, so they are not disallowed. Besides, the wild animals are healthier and less sickly than the domesticated ones. Milk is very difficult of digestion, especially when one is suffering from acidity, and cases have happened when even by gulping down a glass of milk in haste, life has been jeopardized. Milk should be taken as a child does from its mother's breast. If it is sucked or sipped by degrees, it is easily digestible, otherwise not. Being itself hard of digestion, it becomes the more so when taken with flesh. so the Jews are prohibited from taking flesh and milk at the same meal. The foolish and ignorant mother who forces her baby to swallow too much milk beats her breast in despair within a few months on seeing that there is little hope of her darling's life. The modern medical authorities prescribe only a pint of milk even for an adult, and that is to be taken as slowly as possible. And for babies, a feeding bottle is the best means. Our mothers are too busy with household duties, so the maidservant puts the crying baby in her lap and not unfrequently holds it down with her knee, and by means of a spoon makes it gulp down as much milk as she can. And the result is that generally it is afflicted with liver complaint and seldom grows up. That milk proves to be its doom. Only those that have sufficient vitality to survive this sort of dangerous feeding attain a strong and healthy manhood. And think of our old-fashioned confinement rooms, of the hot fomentations given to the baby, and treatments of like nature. It was indeed a wonder and must have been a matter of special divine grace that the mother and the baby survived these severe trials and could become strong and healthy.